Hey everyone, I want to talk about something that, whether you follow politics closely or not, still affects the tone of our country and honestly, the mood of our dinner tables. President Donald Trump is delivering his State of the Union address this month, and already there are lawmakers planning boycotts and protests both outside and inside the chamber. Now, here's something a lot of people don't realize: the State of a Union is actually required by the Constitution. It's not just a speech, it's a formal duty. And when members of Congress choose not to attend, that absence becomes a statement in itself. So, if you've been wondering what this all means and whether protests like this help or hurt the country, stay with me because this matters more than it might seem at first glance. Before we go further, I'm curious. When you see politicians boycott something like this, do you see it as standing up for principles or avoiding dialogue? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear how you think about it. So let's zoom out for a second. The State of the Union is one of those moments that feels ceremonial, but it has real weight. The Constitution says the president shall inform Congress about the State of the Union and recommend measures. Over time, especially in the 20th century, it became this big televised primetime event. Lawmakers from both parties sit in the same room. Applause lines happen, sometimes awkward silence happens, and afterward the opposition gives a response. It's almost like a ritual of democracy, tense sometimes, but still shared, and that shared part is important. Now, this year, you see several Democratic lawmakers have announced they will not attend President Trump's address. Instead, go to a rally called the People's State of the Union. Others plan to attend, but possibly walk out or protest during the speech. Supporters of the boycott argue that attending would legitimize policies they strongly oppose. They say these are not normal times and that normal rituals may not fit the moment. On the other side, the administration has framed the address as an opportunity to highlight what they describe as economic gains, affordability efforts, and stronger border enforcement. The White House has suggested that skipping the speech shows unwillingness to acknowledge policies they believe are benefiting Americans. So already you can see this isn't just about one night. It's about legitimacy. It's about symbolism. And here's where it gets interesting from a civic perspective. Protest has always been part of American history. Boycott, rallies, silent gestures, even coordinated wardrobe choices during speeches. These are not new. During President Trump's first term, there were symbolic protests inside the chamber. In other administrations, members have skipped events entirely. But what feels different now is the scale and coordination. When more than a handful of lawmakers decide not to attend, it raises a deeper question. At what point does protest stop being a side note and start becoming the message itself? You know what's complicated about this? It depends on what you believe protest is supposed to accomplish. Is it meant to persuade? Is it meant to signal to supporters? Or is it meant to disrupt? If a lawmaker believes the president's actions are unconstitutional or harmful, they may see attendance as silent endorsement. From that view, absence becomes moral clarity. But if you believe democratic institutions are strongest when disagreement happens face to face, then leaving the room might feel like walking away from the conversation. And that tension, that's where a lot of Americans are stuck, not just politicians, regular people. I've had friends say, well, if I don't agree with something, I'm not going to show up and clap politely. And I've had others say, no, you show up precisely because you disagree. You sit there and you listen and then you respond. Both arguments have some logic to them. Now, let's talk about what the State of the Union actually does in practical terms. Beyond the applause and political theater, it sets the administration's agenda. It outlines legislative goals. It shapes media coverage, investors watch it, policy analysts watch it, and advocacy groups watch it. It can influence public opinion, which in turn can influence markets, regulations, even local decisions. So even if you're thinking, I don't care about speeches, this is just politics, it still filters down. If the focus is on economic growth, you might see proposals around taxes or regulation. If the focus is on border enforcement, you might see funding shifts. If healthcare is emphasized, that affects families directly. And here's something people don't always think about. When boycott happen, media coverage often shift from policy details to the protest itself. Instead of talking about economic proposals, headlines might focus on who walked out. So the protest changes the conversation. That can be intentional or it can backfire depending on perspective. So then what are the possible consequences? In the short term, probably not much changes about the speech itself. President Trump will deliver it, supporters will applaud, critics will respond, the opposition party will give a rebuttal. That cycle continues. But in the long term, repeated boycotts could shift norms. If attendance becomes optional based on political disagreement, the shared stage of Congress becomes less shared. And when institutions lose shared rituals, polarization can deepen. Not always, but it still can. At the same time, protest can also be a sign of democratic energy. The fact that lawmakers feel free to dissent publicly, that rallies can happen peacefully on the National Mall, that alternative narratives can exist. That is also part of the system. Democracies are noisy, they're not tidy. So you see the paradox, right? Protests can signal both strength and strain at the same time. And I want to be careful here because it's easy to reduce this to good guys and bad guys. But most voters, most families are just trying to make sense of it. They're worried about prices, healthcare, safety, job security. They see lawmakers arguing over attendance and they wonder, is this helping? That's a fair question. If you believe the administration's policies are improving affordability and security, you might view the boycott as unnecessary drama. If you believe the policies are harmful or unconstitutional, you might see the boycott as the only appropriate response. And this is where I think we have to separate emotion from structure. Emotionally, people feel strongly. Structurally, institutions rely on continuity. The State of the Union is one of those institutional anchors when it becomes another battlefield that says something about the broader political climate. So, what we do with that? One practical step is to focus on substance over spectacle. When a speech happens, ask yourself what policies were proposed, what are the actual numbers? How would this affect my state, my town, my taxes, my health care, and separate that from who clapped or who didn't. And another thing to consider is that democracy has gone through tense periods before. There have been boycotts in history. There have been heated speeches. There have been walkouts. The system is bent, sometimes drained, but it has continued. That doesn't mean everything is fine, but it does mean that moments of conflict are not automatically collapse. Also in this matters, peaceful protest is protected in this country. At the same time, peaceful institutional participation is also part of the design. Those two values coexist. The tension between them is part of the American story. So as you watch coverage of the State of the Union or the People's State of the Union rally or the protests inside the chamber, try to notice what's being emphasized. Is it policy? Is it tone? Is it conflict? That lens matters. At the end of the day, whether you support President Trump's second-term agenda or strongly oppose it, the State of the Union moment forces a bigger reflection. What does civic participation look like in divided times? Is it staying in the room? Is it stepping outside it? Or is it something in between? You don't have to have a perfect answer. Most of us don't. But staying informed, staying calm, and focusing on real-world impacts, that's something we can all do. Because speeches come and go, protests rise and fade. But the policies that follow, those are what shape daily,